cattle prods in this.
On your mark, get set. What if I get stage fright?
Too late.
Yeah. Well, y'all were going to see a demonstration on Christmas trees, but I may have to show Christmas twigs if I don't get...
Ready? All right, tonight's demonstrator is Jim Tanksley. He's from the Fort Worth Club. He's going to be demonstrating Mesquite Christmas trees. Jim Tanksley.
Thank you. Hi, how are y'all doing? Well, thanks for inviting me over. I've did this demo a couple of times, and to me it's pretty simple, but some people said, well, I wouldn't have thought of that. And we had a guy several years ago come to our club and show us how to do snowmen. And he used mesquite, and he had developed some special tools, and he could make them really quick, and he sold his for $25, $30. I'll never sell a snowman for $25, $30. It takes too long to make it. But as I was making them, I said, it looks like, does anybody know Michelangelo? Ever heard of him? Michelangelo, the Italian guy. Well, I thought there was a tree inside of this log. I don't know if y'all can see it, but I could see that tree in there, but just looking at that piece of wood. And I said, I want to get that tree out of there. And so tonight we're going to try to get that tree out of there. The faster, we can only go about that speed on this lathe until I get some of the out of balance on it. So if you're doing this at home, if you got a small mini lathe, you can still do it, just do smaller pieces. The diameter determines how difficult it is to turn it, not so much the length. But I'll just show you a few examples over here on the table. You probably all looked at them. I think I lost the mic, but the small one I turned this morning in about 30 minutes. The big fat one, it took me 2 days. A little slow, I don't worry about what tool I use or when I use it or, measuring this or that. I have a few suggestions if y'all want to do this, and I'll just start with that. First of all, I use green mesquite wood. I've tried this with other woods. It doesn't work very well because you turn this tree cross-grain. It's not in grain or side grain, it's cross-grain because I've got it sort of cattywampus here in the lathe. But if you can see out there, both ends are the same, parallel to each other, but we have the log at an angle. So what is that degree? Play with it. See what you like. Main thing is put your center, your live center, in the center of the tree in the bottom. You do that, and then I put the four-prong center or the Sorby center in the sap ring at the top. I found it, you'll end up with a better looking tree all the way down if you get right in that sap ring. Now I've used the safety centers, and they don't work very good because they slip. You don't really need this thing slipping when you have it going around. So I'll start off and I use a spindle roughing gouge, and I'll take away this portion of the tree. On the way over here, Ron came over with me. He said what he does is he's got a board with a line on it. He sort of marks it with chalk, and he cuts part of it off on the bandsaw before he starts. Each his own. I always whack too much of it off if I do that. And I sort of like, I like this part of it. Some people don't, but so when you're doing that, you want to make sure first before you go around that you have your tool rest exactly the way you want it, and then it goes around freely. You want to make sure it's tight in here. Anytime you have bark, you want to wear a face shield. So while I'm taking off the first part of this, I'll wear a face shield. If you can't hear me very good, I'm sorry, but I want to be able to do this again. So we're going to start like that. Alan Lacer's coming in the spring, and he's the one who sold me this rough and gouge, and I decided to treat myself, put a piece of Coca-Cola for the handle, and it works pretty good. So you turn this up as fast as you can do it with your lathe. I have a Powermatic with about 700 pounds of sand on it. And I'm going to have to get used to this. You want to make sure it's centered and that this is tight. No, it'll hold. Okay. So you start up high and you just gradually let it down. And you can do this with a bowl gouge. But you can actually do this with a skew. But I prefer this spindle rough and gouge. So what I'm doing is just taking off that other side of the tree, and we're going really slow. So in mine at home, it would be, we're doing 290, I'd be doing about 500 starting out. Any questions while I'm taking this wood off here? Now, as you get a little bit of it off, you'll want to scoot your tool rest in. Make sure it's tight, and you can add a little bit of speed. Not much. Because that tree's waiting to get out of there. You can do this with dry wood. I have did it with dry wood. The bark will tend to come off. I did it with bores in the wood. In fact, there's one over there right now that I had to fill with epoxy because I wasn't going to waste the tree just because the boar got a little hungry. When I cut my own wood, and when I cut the wood, I do spray it with insecticide, and I seal the ends with anchor seal. I generally cut the wood in February or March. I find that the bark stays on a lot better that way. But as we're cutting this right here, the side that's going to end up having the bark on it, we're not touching it. We're touching the other side of the tree. The only time we touch that is when I start cutting the branches. To me, it's sort of like watching golf. A little slow. It'll pick up fast. I had planned on using some of those that are partially done if this lathe wouldn't turn. But it's got a pretty good balance to it. You just want to make sure you keep that angle where it's cutting and not tilt it too far over where it catches. I know everybody loves to see a turner get a catch. And I got one once, probably a few minutes ago. Y'all didn't notice it. So once I get the shape into a cone, then I got to decide, do I want 1 inch, 1 1/4, or 1 1/2 inches between the branches? The samples I have over on the table, I have samples of 1 inch, the tall, slender one, skinny one. I have 1 1/2, I have 1 1/4. So that determines part of the look. I also have different angles on the branches. Some of them are a very acute angle, and some of them are almost straight in. It determines the look. You decide what you like better. I like, my favorite is that one right there. It was 1 1/4, and I like the way it looks like it's sort of arched on each one of the branches. So we'll have this whipped out here in a second. So I've already got to turn it up about 100 RPMs more than it was. Again, when I've tried this on other trees, this part right here just rips them apart. Mesquite's really forgiving, especially when it's wet. So you're just riding along, not getting in a hurry, wanting to get in a hurry. You're acting like you're on Central Expressway. Stop it. So I got out of balance there for a minute. Let's make sure it's tight. Don't want the front row running. Anybody getting scared yet? So we're about 400 RPM. I can see that tree about to get out of there. Go a little faster. You don't want to do the very tip too small until the very end, because you've got a lot of pressure on it from the tail. But you have to have it enough to know the shape. Looks more like a sangria wine bottle than a tree. I took this concept and I decided I could turn some trees that look like wine bottles. And I turned them and left a square head on them. And a buddy of mine carved them, so we had hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. They were pretty cool. Uh-huh.
Why do you turn the paper on the headstock side instead of on the tailstock side? Usually you look to leave more mass on the headstock side.
Because I'm from Odessa. This is just the way I started turning it, and it works. I probably made a couple hundred of them or more. And so you're saying start up here and go the other way? I'm sure you could. I like, I'll turn my bottom down here and I put some rings on the bottom and I sign it, and it'd be more difficult to do that up here. You can see the shadows in there. We're getting pretty close to So we took off a piece of the bark. No. I'll pick up another piece of wood if it's too bad. Not only Christmas tree. At the house on one of these, I can have it roughed out in very short order. So once I get it close, then I switch over to a bowl gouge. Make sure I've got it tight. I don't really trust this back part, so let's see what we got here. That piece turns. Okay. So this one had some loose bark on the bottom, but I think I can still save the front of it. So this is just a normal bowl gouge. And as you can see, it's a little bit tougher to do this with a bowl gouge than with the roughing gouge. But you get a smoother finish. And the faster you can spin it, the better. Until it starts wobbling. So we've got one piece right here that's so I get down to about right there, and we'll leave that. And I'm not concerned about perfect right now, just the general shape. So we've got, this tree wasn't perfectly straight on this side, so you can see how it indents in, which is okay. I'll take a little bit of the shape out of it. Now with the Mesquite, again, you can go uphill, downhill. What's going on there, Ken, but probably me breathing heavy. I get pretty excited getting that tree out of here. So this one's a little drier than the ones I've been working with. I just grabbed this off the shop floor today. So it's got a little bit more bark coming off. But we're still good. We had this on the back. I'll trim it a little bit more. So the better cone shape you can make, the better look it'll have when you get done. We're going to go with that. Then you come to the end, and you got to square this up. supposed to turn the lathe off when you move the tool rest. If there's any safety police around here. So, pretty smooth. It's got a little hole right there. Like was said earlier, you're going to have defects in your wood, and that's okay. We've lost bark up to here. So I could do a couple of things right now. I could decide that this is going to be a shorter tree, or that this is going to be a tree that has sort of a stand on it. Typically, I take them about 1/2 inch off of the floor. I think they look better like that. But you can take them up higher. And on this one, I'm going to take it up higher. To the edge of that bark. Just about there. I'd rather have a smaller tree that looks good than a bigger one that I don't like. Okay, that's pretty good. So we can take this in and you can do a couple of things at this point. You could cut this off on a bandsaw, recenter it. Or you can make it a nice little base. I'm going to make it a little bit of a base like that. So now you're going to have a tree with a big base on it. I always take and knock the rough edges off. Okay, so when I'm starting to measure this, I always start at the bottom instead of at the top, because it doesn't have to be exact at the top. I'm going to go ahead and do 1 inch. I've got on this stick, I have 1.5, 1 inch, 1 1/4 marked. I just come along here. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a tree, right? Of course, it'd help if I could see. I think I about got these marks right. So once you put your marks on there by some measuring tool, I always take and spin it a little bit. So you see some of them on the table that are at this stage. Then I will take a parting tool after I make sure I got these real good so I can see them. And if I look at it and I don't like the distance in between them, I can always change it up when I'm starting the parting tool. So I use the Stuart Batty parting tool. Now I'm going to go into the tree, and I want to go in until I get past the bark. So it didn't have to be very much past the bark, but in order for this to look good, I have to go past the bark. So if I was at home, I'd probably still be wearing my face shield, but I also got a nice air conditioner in my shop. It's a little warm in here. So, I'm trying to go straight in. Straight in, and I need a little bit more speed. Now it's wallowing a little bit, but I'm trying to go straight in. And as I go down through here, what I'm going to be looking for is to have a secondary line all the way down. And I put tape on this before and go in this much all the way down. You can do that. but you can see, your eyes can see down through there, and you just try to make it all the same. Doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same. So I don't know if it shows on the camera, but there's a secondary line starting in there. Just lost a big piece of bark. So as you're going down through here, of course, as you get closer to the top, be careful. Don't go too deep and cut your tree off. I sent my wife a picture of all of them together today, and I put it on Facebook, and I said, I'm so treed over you. Well, she liked it. So I'm not quite through. You can see, I want to see some of the sap underneath that. So I'm going to go and make another run and just make it a little bit deeper. And there's a piece of loose bark on here. I can hear it. So you may get the gist, but you may not end up with a good tree. So part of that came off right there. We'll live with it. Still have to get past the bark. And we had a guy last year at our Christmas party. He did one out of a solid tree like this. And this is all he did, and he painted it green, put a gold star on top. It looked pretty good. So I still need to go through that bark right there. Take the idea and add your own ideas to it. It's almost like playing an instrument. Going up and down the keyboard. Okay, I'm still, that sort of dips in right there, so I got to make it a little bit deeper. And that's as far as I dare take it, so I'm going to start. This is one of the easy wood tools. At first I started with a spindle gouge, took it at a 20-degree angle. Then I took some Sears and Roebuck tools, cheap tools I got in the garage sale, and I grind them to this kind of shape. Tried that. You got to be very careful because when it's touching on both sides, you tend to get a catch. And that happened a lot with the homemade tools. This works pretty good. The problem, the way these come, they got a little nub on each side, and so I took this to the grinding tool and took that off because every time I'd finish, I would have a line in the branch. This helps a lot. Still end up with a little bit of one. So let's see if I can go a little faster now. So the angle I'm at, I don't know if you can see from the camera, but I'm just a slight angle on the top, almost straight in. I find that to be the best. And then I just sort of hold and push with the rest of it. I want to end up with about 1/4 of an inch of the flat left. So you hold it down, push, you go into the top. Okay, so I'm going to go with that. Make sure this is tight. you do this with a skew? Probably. Or John Horn probably could. This works for me. There goes that loose bark. I'm just trying to eyeball and keep about the same dimensions on these. They can be bigger to smaller, the same size. Can you tell I'm not an engineer? Nothing against engineer. I have one in the family. I've got a son that's got a aerospace engineering. He's a veteran. He's got an aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering degree, and he's out there hanging garage doors. I don't get it. But he's happy, so. So I'm trying to keep about the same angle as I go through this. If you went to SWAT, Mahoney, he's real big on your best measuring tool is your eyes. And you can sort of look and see as you're going if you're close. So I've turned about 15 trees with this blade. So they last a long time. I usually don't wear them out. I drop them. And if you drop them, you're done. So this one I dropped twice. These are like $16. So I took it to the belt sander and sanded that so I can lay that on my lathe and it doesn't roll off. That probably never happens to y'all, but so this is where you don't want to apply too much pressure and break it. I took it. A couple of things are happening right here. One, since we had it at an angle, your pith is going to come out somewhere in here. Now this happens to be down here, so it's a. But if it's up here, you really got to be careful as you're putting the pressure on that because that's a real weak part of the tree. So there's a couple of tricks you can do if you knock the bark off. You don't want to just use it for barbecue. One of the things I do is my good friend Drew back there in the back row is a corporate chef, and he's got these little burner things that they do creme brulee. It works real great to torch this thing before you knock the bark off. I'm going to get this semi-close, but I'm not going to go much more than this. Okay. So we're starting to get the shape of the tree. Again, this one had some dry bark in it. So the next step is I take a spindle gouge and I come through and I knock off the corners of the tree, the sharp edges. Now this one's cut at a 20-degree angle because I can also do cleanup work on the branches if I need to. That's an awful sharp angle. But that's my first step to start making these look round. So you got a couple of choices you can take from knocking them off and then lightly glide along and do some scraping and pretty it up. You could take 36 grit sandpaper that they were selling at SWAT and start with that. You know, this is not fine art, so it doesn't have to be to 1,000 grit, but people don't like to pay a whole lot for these. I found that, you know, $60 I can sell them all day long. The $200 ones, they don't. Oh, I love it, but I got to buy groceries. So you just take and sort of knock that line off. You can do it. Also have a clean that up a little bit. Okay, so we're getting the main look without that. Maybe this could be a step tree. Just got part. So you just want to try to take those little pieces out and round it. It's what I do. You don't have to. I think it looks better. Pretty much got that. So now I would take these strips of sandpaper, work good. I put it in reverse so the stuff goes towards y'all. And I would sand it like that, or like this top one where it's a little rough through here, where it was torn. I would come in and turn it the right direction. And you can come across here and start cleaning it up. I lost a little bit of balance there. Gives it a little cleaner look, because the Easy Wood tool is really scraping it. So you could be really fancy and come through here, and I like to. Is my head in the way? Sorry. I'll come in here and I'll cut the underside down. It gives it more of that weeping effect on the branches. I don't want to get that one catch. So you can play with it back and forth like this. This is what took me the time on that one, because every time I'd come in here and undercut, I would leave a groove on the other side, and I had to come back and get it, and then I'd put a groove on the other side, and it was just back and forth like that little catch I just got then. You keep playing with it. You can get some pretty bad catches doing this, so be careful. And you can trip over cords as well. So I'm coming straight in with that, and it doesn't want to go. Put my thumb behind it. Try it one more time. Okay, so I can do some cleanup with a vortex tool. I could do this edge right here. I could come back and get a little bit of it with the, because it's skated. Come back and do the spindle gouge, but I want to show you all how I do the top and bottom. So when you get that, the basics there, and this has got some rough stuff in there, I cannot leave that. Drives me crazy. So we'll turn that out.
We can see that disappearing as you were going down through.
You can see the cleanup. So I still have a little bit of a ring. So it's back and forth until you get that. If you're as good as Larry at turning, you wouldn't have all that problem. But then you sand it. You turn that. And what I do on this is I will, first of all, before I take it off at the bottom, I always, sort of my signature on my bowls and on these is I put a ring, a couple of rings on the bottom, so that I have something to sign it with. Now, Vortex tool, you can come in just like that, and I got a catch. But basically, I do that, and then I will take it to this, and I'll get this a little bit smaller. You want to make sure the bottom is not flat. You want it concave. So I'll take this down quite a bit. It got a little run, but you get the idea. You could carve up underneath this one. The okay. So on this one, I would go up and. The problem right now with doing this is I'm real weak right there. So if I push too hard, or if I get a catch, the whole tree's going to be out of balance. This tree's going in the fire pit. So then I would take this off. After I did that, and I'd take it to the bandsaw. And I would cut right here, cut it right here, and then I take sander with a pad. Y'all with me? And I sand like that, and I sort of twist it as it goes around. Now you could do it with this much on there, but it'd be a lot of dust to be sucking up, so it's better to cut it off with the bandsaw. Then that, I take a piece of 80 grit until I get right up there, and then I'll hit that with 200, and that will be your Christmas tree. So that's how I turn them. Of course, when you're in your shop, not everybody in the world's looking at you. You do a little bit better job, but that's the basics. This one's about half naked, but hopefully you can get the idea. Yeah, so when I get them to this point, after I've sanded, sometimes I'll take and I'll put a 3-inch disc on a 2-inch pad, and I'll come and I'll just sand this a little bit with that. You can get up in there a little bit if I want to make it smoother like this one. So I'll spend some time on the finish work of it, and then I take Danish oil and I take a brush. Usually I use those little metal handled brushes that are about half this size. Come in a big package, you know. Dip them in the Danish oil, and I just start brushing it. Because with a rag, you can't really get on that bark very well. And then I'll turn it upside down, and I'll take the brush and I'll get it in all those cracks there. And then I'll turn it back, and the extra from that started to flow on this. And then I'll take a rag, and with that rag I'll wipe it. Now I found, I don't know if y'all have, but used to I'd put Danish oil on there and I'd do that process and I'd let it sit and it'd be, the next day it was dry, looked good. Now I've had it on this one, I don't know if you can see the shining, but I believe they changed the formula on the Watco Danish oil. It's stickier and it doesn't dry as well and it leaves a residue. So I'm starting to cut mine with paint thinner because I think they put more varnish in it. See, Danish oil is boiled linseed oil, varnish, and paint thinner. And so I'm cutting it, but get it the way you want it, and then it'll be that color.
You get towards the bottom of the can, it'll get like that because the carrier paint in it evaporates. It's sticky.
Well, I've got a brand new gallon jug that's like that. So, yeah, getting after it. So these, I just wanted to show if that one failed, this is an example of a bigger log, and it would look similar to this one when it got through, but it sort of started out like that. So you cut that side off, same thing with these others. These are just, so when you're looking at the log, imagine what's going to be the side that's going to be left, because I like it with all this on here. So I'll pick out the side that looks the gnarliest and hopefully the straightest, because if it causes you problems if it's concave. If it's straight, it's a lot easier to do. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yes, sir. February, March, yeah. Well, I start turning immediately. Of course, it's really wet then, but that's when, other than this stupid piece I turned tonight, this was probably last year's wood. But when it's still wet, you don't have this bark problem. You'd probably have problems with the bark coming off, unless it was just soaking wet. After, it just doesn't tend to stay on there as good as when you cut it in the wintertime. So you can cut it in January, it'd be fine. You could super glue all that stuff back on, but I mean, this is a tree. I don't have, I mean, in my big bowls, this is not what I turn. I turn large bowls. I turn large mesquite bowls, natural edge. And on one of those that I may get $2,000 for, now I'll work the bark back on it. But on these, I just toss it in the fire pit and go get another one. Because I got a lot of wood. I got a barn full of wood. Yeah. Sure. So the first step is to make sure you cut the log right. So if you can see on this one, it's at a little bit of an angle. Not too much, but so I take and I go into the sap ring, and I put a point right into the sap ring, and I hit it right in the center of that. So I would come here. This has got anchor seal on it, so it's a little slick. But I would find my point that I'd put in the sap ring, and I'd back this up. And ideally what you want, and you won't get this every time, is that your back side is straight. You're wanting these to be parallel down. Well, this one's not exactly straight. That's the reason I chose not to go with it earlier. It's a little out of whack. There's the demo you do and then the demo you wish you did. This was the right log. I mean, look at that tree inside of there. And if y'all had another hour, I'd turn that one for you. But that's the way you mount it. I got 7 minutes? You want to start? I'll do it. Somebody got to sweep this stuff up. Yeah. Yeah, if you put it up here and you don't like the way that line looks, and you like another line, like that's probably better looking than that, then I can just readjust it, recut it. I mean, there's nothing that says right now I can't take this and come in here and move it to here, because I'm going to cut the rest of that off. Now, see how out of whack it is? It's harder to turn. It's easier to come off. So if you do that, you may come back and go cut it at the bandsaw, then put it back on here, remount it. The bottom's off too. To me, I just take the gouge, straighten it up, I'm done. Any other questions? You can do, again, you can do snowmen, just try different things. I did an angel a year ago using the same technique, except I sort of made wings out of it. So just play with it, have fun. Do you have a question? Tip. And then you turn it around. It was getting a little dull tonight. It wasn't going. You can tell when you start going into the wood, if it's green wood and it's not smooth, it's starting to wear. And that was pretty rough as it was going in there. You don't have to have all those tools. You can do it with a spindle gouge and a scraper and shape your own scraper. I just find that those work a lot better.
Any other wood besides cedar?
Not that I've tried. I've tried doing it on Bradford pear and silver maple and our local woods. I even tried it on pecan. Pecan's bark's too big. Doesn't work real good. This is the only, and plus this is the only wood that is, we're cutting this thing cross grain. Most of it just rips it to shreds. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Jim. If we can get someone